Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up, and welcome into another special off-season edition. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am your host, Eric Romoff. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav, and he is still the captain of our ship, checking in here on the early shift on a Thursday. MC Holland 34 over on Twitter, Mr. Mike Holland. Mike, how is it going tonight?
Tonight, man. Yeah, we're used to doing it at night, right? It's already hot. It's almost 10 a.m. and 100 degrees here down here in Texas, but I'm doing good. We got the NBA draft tonight, so that's pretty exciting. I'm going to get to see a lot of guys that they covered during DFS last year, really during the entire season. I head off to the professional level. That's always a fun time, always getting a ton of trades. We saw the trade yesterday with Jeremy Grant, so I'm sure there'll be more fireworks to come. And also I'm excited because there is only one guy left on my top 100 transfer board. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But more importantly, I think we have another sweet giveaway today to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very much so a momentous occasion. We are going to be covering Villanova basketball here and going into further detail in that in just a moment. But for those of you that are riding along with us on YouTube, first and foremost, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps grow the channel and grow the things that we are trying to do. But also, for all of you participating on YouTube, you have a chance to win a signed Dante DiVincenzo jersey. So all you have to do, make sure you subscribe to the channel and then answer this pinned question in the top of our chat. What would you consider a successful season for Coach Neptune in year one? Everyone who does that will be entered to win, and we will be drawing a winner for that on Saturday. So you do have some time to get that question answered, to share with all of your friends and family and make sure that they get their chance at winning this pretty clean jersey.
Yeah, that's super exciting. We had the Duke UNC one. That was awesome. So, DiVincenzo was a great player for Villanova. And, I'm even more excited because we get to spend some time talking to the man that covers some Philly hoops here, writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Mike Jensen. So if we can pull him up here. Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing great, guys. Thanks for having me, Mike, Eric.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on, Mike. You've been covering this Villanova program for many, many years. Definitely have your finger on the pulse. So, wanted to jump in with some huge offseason news, right? Jay Wright, seemingly out of the blue, decided to call it a career after 21 seasons and 2 national championships. So very much so a changing of the guard here with this Villanova program. Now former assistant coach Kyle Neptune steps in, heads into his first season now here. So want to know from your perspective, what's sort of the vibe or the sense around the program during this transition, and how do you see Coach Neptune handling the pressure that comes with replacing such a prolific coach?
Yeah, massive news, not just around Philadelphia, but in college basketball. Huge transition that they decided to do in a very sort of smooth bridge to keep continuity to the program. Kyle Neptune had just left the year before. He had been the top assistant and, went to Fordham for 1 year as head coach and came back. So the vibe I get is they're trying to make it as business as usual as possible. That was the goal. And I think if you think about it, as soon as obviously this happened quickly, they announced Kyle Neptune the same time as they announced Jay Wright leaving. Kyle Neptune was coming. And I think my first reaction was even like, interesting. They could have had anybody in the country be interested in the job. But my second thought was, if you're a veteran Villanova player, and you saw them at the Final Four and in the NCAA tournament, the players returning, Caleb Daniels, Eric Dixon, Brandon Slater, the fact that there would be more of the same was, I think, vitally important in this transfer portal. Here's an NIL offer from all over the Power Five to those players. And then that stability allowed a really important recruiting class, an incoming freshman class, to all stay on board. So that's the goal, is that very little changes. Obviously, can the program that Jay Wright built remain the same without Jay Wright?
Yeah, it's fascinating news, right? Especially in the Big East that, seems to be, maybe a changing of the guard. We'll see. There's a lot of good teams this year. But, just kind of wanted to dive into this roster here, the upcoming roster for the season. Big question mark, right, is Justin Moore. We saw the, terrible injury there in the last few minutes of the Elite Eight. He, along with, obviously, Gillespie, have been key cogs for the last few years. We've been covering this team. Is there any update on Justin Moore's recovery, and is there any expectation for him coming up to play at all this year?
I think there's hope. I think there's hope that January, February, you can see him if all goes well. Too early to know if that's completely realistic, but that remains the hope as recently as someone I talked to within their program in the last few days. So, so I've got Justin Moore on my list of people to talk to soon on how his early recovery is going. Because let's face it, they couldn't compete with Kansas without Justin Moore. Justin Moore is too important a player last season, even with Colin Gillespie and Jermaine Samuels still there. He was just both ends kind of player. Took the tough defensive assignments. So it's an X factor. I'm not sure. I think that's if you figure they're going to start the season without him, then you look at it in some ways. You can almost invert that and say then he becomes the bonus player later on in the season.
Yeah, certainly a nice to have piece whenever he is healthy and available to join this team. And we've actually got Scott Vernon checking in here on YouTube, following along. He thinks that a successful season would be finishing top 3 in the Big East and a Sweet 16 berth for Coach Neptune in his first year. So definitely keep those answers coming. We love to hear what the pulse of the fan base is. Mike, I want to continue down this path, looking at year one for Coach Neptune. We just talked about how likely he will be without Moore for this first season. So that means that he's probably going to have to turn to some pretty talented incoming freshmen for this class. We've got Cam Whitmore coming in, where there's a ton of buzz around him this offseason and his performance with USA basketball. But also you've got 4-star guard Mark Armstrong, who's really turned some heads as he's getting ready to head into Villanova. So overall, really impressive class coming in for Coach Neptune in year one. We want to know from you, what are your thoughts on the class as a whole, and is there maybe an X factor who can really step up in year one?
Well, and interestingly, the way Villanova has grown in stature is by not depending on a full class of freshmen. So I think we can break this down a little bit, that they're going to start by depending on the veterans. With Justin Moore not there at the start of the year, Caleb Daniels is going into his 5th year of college. They have great faith in Caleb Daniels. They're not a program that's going to pound with a point guard. So a backcourt of Caleb Daniels and Jordan Longino, who got hurt and missed the NCAA tournament. I think they've got a chance to really put pressure on opposing defenses with those guys. Slater, Dixon is an inside-out kind of big man who is he's a wide body, but he's got a really nice jump shot out. So those are the guys you're going to look at. Then you mentioned Cam Whitmore. He's the guy, I think. They think he's as explosive as any player that they've had in a long time coming up to Villanova. Jermaine Samuels leaves. It certainly would be no shock if Cam Whitmore steps right into the starting lineup and provides some things. He's got to prove he can do some things defensively as they they're switching man to man, that he can fit with others. They've had other high profile players, Quinterly and others, who came in with great expectations, and then it was slowed down a little bit. But the expectation on Whitmore is that Armstrong might be one of those guys who, if he is a top level Big East guard, I'm not sure they need him to be that right away. He'll fight for playing time, and whether he gets that this season, is all to be determined in front of him. And then they've got, you asked for an X factor. I don't think necessarily maybe this year, but Brendan Housen from Texas, top 50 guard, 2-guard, highly regarded, kept his commitment. Like, same as, Longino last year. Wait your turn a little bit is my guess, but it's a big class.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing Whitmore. Man, it's pretty impressive watching the USA basketball clips there. But, last year, Wildcats ran a 6, sometimes 7-man rotation. Guys played big minutes. 3 of those guys, you mentioned Daniels, Slater, who had the big game against Kansas, and Eric Dixon. They're bringing back a lot of experience. Is there someone you expect out of these guys to maybe fill the leadership void that's left by Gillespie and the injury of Moore? And do you think anybody can kind of take their production up a notch?
Yeah, on the leadership, I think they're really good there, because if you think about it, Gillespie and Samuels weren't even supposed to be there last year. That was a 5th-year pandemic year for those guys. So they essentially had almost guys who were really sort of a pro mentality. And Jay Wright would even say Gillespie was like an assistant coach, just on the floor, like literally telling guys, no nonsense. Here's what we're doing. So Caleb Daniels is a really mature guy. I mean, I think he was born mature. I mean, he was valedictorian of his high school class in New Orleans. So he's that guy. Justin Moore, whether he's playing or not, is going to be a leader on this team. Eric Dixon and Brandon Slater, these guys are, solid guys. So I think they're more than fine on the leadership side of things.
Yeah, definitely plenty of veteran presence there. So, maybe not necessarily avoid with, a player or two, being unavailable or exiting the program, but certainly a thread to watch. Another thread that we've been watching all off season, we were talking about this a little bit backstage before the show, is this brand new transfer portal and NIL landscape in the college basketball game. From the outside looking in, it seems like it's been somewhat quiet on that front for Villanova. There's also been some rumors out there that the emergence of NIL and the transfer portal may or may not have played a role in Jay Wright's decision to leave. So, specifically looking at this program, want to know from you, is there any credence to those rumors? And can you tell us more broadly how the program has navigated these NIL waters?
Yeah, on Jay Wright, I mean, if you figure everything factors in, how could this era not factor into decision making? I think there were plenty of factors, but let's assume that if this is a new era, do you want to start over and change the way you do things? I mean, Jay Wright was as much a control freak over his program as anybody else out there, so you have to give up a little bit of control. He also was, of the position that could keep other players in college basketball longer as they make deals, which we've already seen around the landscape a little bit. For Villanova, they've got guys with some deals. They had, Gillespie and Samuels had some things going last year. So, they're not oblivious to the landscape. There's not a Villanova collective yet, but there have been rumblings about that. So, they understand. And that's where Kyle Neptune, okay, he comes in fresh, excited. By the way, I think those expectations, that's pretty, I mean, top 3, I think they're a little underrated in the Big East, to be honest with you. I think that's a pretty good group that they've got coming back. I know Creighton and others have plenty of talent, but that's a pretty good group. I think Villanova has established itself that that bar is exactly right. Get to the Sweet 16. That's a good season. Short of that, then there are questions. There are questions on, for a stretch before he won the 2 national championships, Jay Wright wasn't getting to the Sweet 16 for a little bit. And that's the pressure game always for these kinds of programs. And it will be for Kyle. Kyle will have to prove that he can get this program to that second weekend, not every year, but with some regularity. That to me is in fact the bar at Villanova.
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned it, and we've kind of sneak peeked here, but the Big East looks like a gauntlet on paper. Creighton, you mentioned St. John's looks pretty good. Providence roster, you got an older Xavier roster. When you look at the Big East, I know we're 135 days out. Do you have any early favorites, and how do you see Villanova kind of stacking up against these new look rosters?
No, I think you mentioned them, and I think that Villanova was sort of vulnerable last year. I mean, I went out to Marquette. They had already lost at home to Marquette, and when they went out there, I figured, okay, well, they're going to turn the tables, and they did. They did not. They got beaten and beaten fairly. I don't know if I'd quite say soundly, but Marquette was in control of the game the whole way, and I thought, okay, I'm not sure Villanova is going to get it done this year. Well, obviously, they got it done. They got it done in New York. They got it done in the regular season. They got it done in the NCAA tournament. I think I think they're going to put pressure on opposing defenses. I think Creighton will put a lot of pressure on opposing defenses. St. John's will too. Like you said, Providence is going to have a very interesting team. So for me, looking at Villanova, can they get it done defensively without, especially Justin Moore for a while? So that becomes, back to that question of when can Justin Moore come in and contribute without Jermaine Samuels. Gillespie had become a much better defensive player late in his career, a really solid guy. So to me, the questions are not whether they can score points. They can score points. Is whether those parts can fit together defensively, and a player like Whitmore can, hold his own at that end of the court.
Yeah, no, one thing, it's going to be a really fun Big East. I'm excited about it. But last question before we get you out of here, we're asked the audience and our followers here, what does Neptune have to do here for it to be considered a successful transition in year one?
Yeah, year one successful transition is show that he was the right choice. So you can do that in any number of ways. You can win the Big East regular season. You can win the Big East tournament. You can get to the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. Those are, the bars to get over. And also, short of that, in the Big East season, win the games that look winnable, win your share of those, so that just, a competency of coaching is apparent to the recruiting world out there.
Couldn't agree more. Mike Jensen absolutely dialed in to this Villanova program. If you are not already following him on Twitter, you can see his handle scrolling across the bottom or there in his frame, Jensen Off Campus. You can read all of his fantastic work over at Inquirer.com. Mike, thank you very much for spending some time with us and helping us get a better pulse check on the latest with these Wildcats.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Mike.
So, Mike, you sort of mentioned it off the top. We have a scant few names left on our big board. We're down to one now, but that is because a couple of guys made their decision in the days that have passed since we have been here covering college basketball on One and Done. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the first name of the two that chose his new home for next year?
Yeah, so the first one was huge news, and I probably got this guy rated a little bit too low on my transfer board, but he's number 25 on our list, and that's Pete Nance. Yes, brother of Larry Nance, is going to fill the Brady Manick role and head to North Carolina. So, big news here. I know some people have him as a top 10 transfer. There's some things that I kind of question about his game, but I think for Manick, it's going to be a little bit better defensively. Probably not a deadly shooter, but a good shooter. I think obviously this is probably going to make North Carolina number one in the preseason polls. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't, coming off the national runner-up. But this lineup looks pretty good in the front five. And then we kind of talked about the freshman class that'll help out there, and then some of these guys like Dontrez Styles that are going to have opportunities coming off the bench now. So any thoughts on UNC and probably this number one projection to start the year?
Man, I think you hit it spot on, right? Like UNC sure seems like the favorite to start the year is number one, depending on what state you are in or what sports book you fancy. There are some futures out there that have them as low as 2 or 3, but those could also be lagging with this Pete Nance news coming out not that long ago. To fill in the Brady Manick role, I mean, those are huge shoes to step into. So, I don't know if we'll see him produce quite at that level that we saw out of Manick last year, but in terms of what he's trying to do on the court, very much so has the skill set to function in a similar capacity for the Tar Heels. Before we jump to your next player to choose their destination, I want to catch up on a few people here from the chat. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, definitely hit that like button. Definitely hit that subscribe button. That is part of the way that you get entered to win the DiVincenzo jersey that we're giving away. Scott checking in from a question a few minutes back tends to agree after this year's performance with USA Basketball. Cam and Mark's expectations are through the roof. And Alex coming in with some kind words for Mike Jensen. Absolute legend, probably putting it lightly. He has been covering Villanova basketball for years and years and is absolutely dialed in on that program. So thank you both for participating. Mike, as we get ready to round out here, tell us about someone who not only squeaked in as one of the last players on your board, but also one of the last players to make their decision during this transfer portal period.
Yeah, so number 99 on the big board, coming in as a knockdown shooter is going to be Emmanuel Acott, who chose to take his talents to Memphis, transferring from Boise State over to Penny Hardaway and the gang. Going to link up with our number one player on the board, Kendrick Davis. It's going to need some floor spacing so that Davis can operate. Memphis is losing 84% of their made three-pointers last year, so this is definitely a role that Acott can help fill. He shot around 37% last year from three. He's also got some nice versatility on the defensive end. He's a big guy, so 6'7", 6'8" type wing. Penny doing some work here. Definitely, obviously Houston in that conference is going to be a juggernaut, but definitely this is looking like another tournament team for Penny. So any thoughts on Acott and his decision?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a big gap in perimeter shooting, like you mentioned there, and throwback popping up right around here on your YouTube screen momentarily. We interviewed Jason Munns not that long ago, and he highlighted that as a point of emphasis as Memphis really stocks up by way of the transfer portal. So, better late than never, obviously getting in just under the gun here, but a player that very much so stands to contribute in a meaningful way from the outside for this new look Tigers team. For those of you that are not already, again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Not only does it support the channel, but it also gets you entered to win that autographed Dante DiVincenzo jersey. And as well, get over to drroto.com. It is the place to find Mike's big board, all of his work around college basketball, as well as the other sports that he covers oh so well. And by getting signed up, you get access to our members-only Discord. We are only 130-ish days out from the season. So all of this off-season work, all of these off-season reps will absolutely have you dialed in and ready to get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.